Wonderful. Deepika, please can you introduce the session and take this forward?
Yeah. So in this session, we all will take you through a web presentation wherein we will discuss about the equity markets which have been so far now since 2018. In detail, we will discuss the way forward, something about the mistakes which people have been doing and for what will mistakes ideally investors should avoid right now, how inflation and compounding affect the global goal planning, and most importantly, how basically financial planning, goal-based investment makes you a better investor in the end, and all together followed by some compounding killers, and there will be some question and answers also. I would request you all in between the presentation, if you would be having any questions, you can just drop your question in the chat box, so that by the end of the session, by the end of the presentation, we can just tackle all those things and we can counter all your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Anirudh.
Thank you so much, Deepika. I must start by saying that it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. And I've had the privilege of speaking to a lot of you over the last few years, as you've been we've been investing through us for such a long time. And I must say it's a great honor, it's a great privilege to be interacting with you. And thank you for taking time out of your weekend for this session. I hope it's an hour well spent for all of you. So Deepika has already given us a very nice and succinct introduction to the agenda of the session. I'm going to move forward and we'll start off with a bit of a recap about what's been happening globally in the economy and how it's affected the markets over the last 3-4 years, right? The thing is, it's been a very, very challenging time for investors, and I've spent the last decade and a half in this industry, and it's difficult to compare the last 3-4 years and how they've shaped up with literally any other phase in the economy that I have seen, including 2008, simply because I think this phase has really tested investors like no other phase before. Because alongside price corrections, this has also been a very extended kind of a time correction scenario where every time things seem to be getting a little better, every time there are green shoots, there is just another knockout punch which is being delivered. And as investors, it is very, very understandable that you might be feeling frustrated with what's going on. So the objective of this session is not to make any predictions about the markets or where they're going to go exactly, but to give you a very rational assessment of our point of view of how the next 3 to 6 months are looking. And of course, from our experience, give you a bit of a formula about how we can actually leverage the current situation, frame the current situation to our advantage, and create wealth regardless of what's happening around us. So just a quick recap to begin with. This is how the last few years have shaped up. We had demonetization, which affected an economy which was already suffering from low consumption. Consumption being one of the key pillars, key drivers of the economy, was already at a low point, and demonetization hit that further. We saw a slowdown in consumption along with government spends and infrastructure being the three pillars of the GDP, as most of you must already know. And consumption took a hit like never before. And we saw real estate sales, passenger vehicle sales coming down to lows every single year, right? We of course saw bad loans and NPAs. Those have been very well documented and extensively written about. They crippled the economy to an extent. They reduced faith in our economy to a very large extent. And that is still actually an ongoing crisis. We saw the NBFC crisis, which is an extension of the bad loans, of course. And the NBFC crisis brought a lot of companies to their knees. Companies which are marquee names, which we would have absolutely not been able to predict as candidates for a downfall, like your DHFLs of the world and ILFS, very strong names came crumbling down. And all this has happened in the last 3-4 years. We had global trade wars, which the Trump versus China face-off, which rattled the economy, which again reduced the risk-on sentiment in the economy. And of course, the Indo-China border tensions more recently. And just when we thought that things were going to ease off and the cycle was about to turn around, we had the big bad wolf called COVID-19, which is a crisis that is still ongoing, and which, to be very honest, nobody I speak to or nobody I know, even experts, can't really predict the exact impact of the COVID-19 crisis and how it's going to play out over the next 6 to 9 months. So this gives you a picture of what you as investors have had to contend with, And hats off to all of you, because this has not been an easy time to invest at all. And I know for a fact that a lot of you have been very disciplined with the way you've invested. You've continued doing your SIPs, you've continued saving for your goals through all of this. And we will discuss at a later point in the presentation why we think this is a good strategy and how it's going to pay off. So this is a very, very interesting graph, which I'd like to highlight to all of you, right? What we see generally when we track markets, or when we think indices, we look at the Nifty or the Sensex. And we tend to forget that the Nifty is basically just 50 shares and the Sensex is just 30 shares. And the broader stock market actually comprises of closer to 2,500 shares that are actively traded on a daily basis. And it is these 2,500 shares which would be a much more significant and a much more realistic indicator of how the stock markets or the economy are doing as a whole. So while, as you can see, the Nifty, having peaked out around 2018, stayed flat for a while, collapsed in March, as we all know, that's again been very well documented, and then saw a remarkable bounce back more or less to where we were in 2018. If you see the broader markets, which basically are your mid caps and small caps, this graph tells you a different story altogether. So mid caps and small caps had a brilliant run in the year 2017. They saw heady highs. They saw incredible returns, and subsequently a lot of investors rushed into them. Again, something we will cover at a later point in this presentation. But since that point, it's basically been more or less a downslide for them. So why I say this at this point is, we tend to fixate on indices, we tend to fixate on the Nifty, on the Sensex. But if you see the broader index, the broader markets, they have really, really been through a carnage, a bloodbath kind of a situation over the last 3 years. And that's the reason why equities as an asset class have not really delivered the kind of returns which we would have liked them to. But then again, it's not the way equities move in the near term are definitely not in our control. So this gives us a picture of exactly what we've had to contend with over the last 3-4 years as investors. And you faced this head on, you've borne the brunt, and for that, hats off to you. Deepika, is there anything you'd like to say about how SIP returns have behaved in the last 3 years, and some things you've noticed as a result?
Well, Anirudh, I would like to say that I do agree how indices have been performing so far now, how markets have been performing so far now. Even if, let's say, I'll take it a very rough example. If, let's say, there is an investor who has been investing since 2018, being a monthly SIP investor, I would say. At this point of time, they must be sitting either at flat or, let's say, might be negative returns, as the data also shows that different indices have performed minus 1.55, minus 4.17. So these are the returns which how exactly fund or categories have delivered. But now what I believe, after seeing these things only, investors get into the behavioral traps, wherein they start looking at, they start thinking in this manner. They should have walk off, they should have gone for the fixed deposit. Might be, if let's suppose I would have been at a place of an investor, I should have thought like this, that I should cut my losses and exit. Might be in a worst scenario, I should have thought in this manner also, that let me stop my SIPs now. The moment when things will come under control or situation improves or when the economy recovers, I'll come back. Or might be, what if markets are only going to collapse and they will never recover? Then what do you think? What is your like what I'm asking you in a nutshell? Is this actually in a general manner? Is this normal? Because as per your experience, I want to understand this. What how generally investors react?
See, Deepika, I'd like to start by saying that all these points that you mentioned about, I should have been in an FD, or let me get out and start again later. And these are extremely natural and very, very normal ways of thinking. And every single investor, me included, I do think like this myself. Very often I have to check myself. But this is a very normal reaction to any volatile market. And as you can see in the slide in front of you, and I'll explain this a little bit to everyone present. This is not a graph which is related to equities or to any other specific asset class. So this is the result of global studies of how investors, any investor, seasoned investor, new investor, panicky investor, it doesn't matter what sort of investor you are and what asset class you invested in. This is the standard cycle of how an investor's mind works, right? So you talk about behavioral traps, right?
Yeah.
This is the reason why investors fall into these behavioral traps. One, because it is very natural to gain in confidence after an asset class goes up in price, because we get confidence from that number in the end. When you read past returns are 50%, 60%, 70%, 100%, or when your friend tells you that you invested in so and he invested in so and so asset class and earned a 30% return, these things build your confidence. Now, the only issue here is that confidence peaks at the peak of the bull market in any asset class, and this is scientifically proven through the ages, tested across all asset classes. At the point of overconfidence is when most people are more inclined to invest, right? And that, unfortunately, is the greatest risk of loss as well. So the point of highest confidence is also the point where you have the highest risk of loss in any asset class. Therein lies the dilemma for any investor, because he's constantly having to battle his own mind. I'll give you an example of this. Two examples come to my mind. One, the example of real estate back in 2010, which I'm sure a lot of people who are participating here today were also part of that frenzy. I know I was. I've never seen so much exuberance, so much excitement about real estate as I saw back in 2009, 10, 11. And that is when prices had already gone up exponentially. I'm talking 2, 3, 4 times. I have seen people getting in and flipping their property at 4 times their value in just 1 year. And the maximum inflows, the maximum home loans that were taken to leverage and buy happened at that peak point. And I personally know at least 10 people who are stuck in an illiquid real estate, which has been basically not appreciating in value for the last 8 to 10 years. Another example of this is very recent, more recent is gold. So one, COVID-19 was an exogenous shock. No one could have predicted it. And the level of the shock led to a stellar rise in gold prices. Gold, which had been in its shell for almost 8 years, now in the last 3-4 months has seen maximum inflows in terms of gold ETF, sovereign gold bonds, etc., etc. So again, an example of investors getting confidence, seeing past returns. Now the reverse. The reverse means when there's panic and despair and when there's fear, which basically means when things are not as good as they should be. That is the point of maximum opportunity for gain, because asset cycles reverse. But that is also the point when very few people invest. Very few people are inclined to invest. So this, when you talk about behavioral gaps, behavioral traps, I think this graph sums it up very beautifully, because the one thing that is constant in any asset, be it real estate, be it equities, be it bonds even, is volatility. Volatility is always going to be there because there is a market and there are buyers and sellers, and each buyer and seller has their point of view. And that's how markets are made. The only issue is, and we'll come to that later, and Harshit is also going to discuss a few very interesting things related to how these cycles eventually lead to certain mistakes which can be irreversible at times. The fact is, just being cognizant of this, just being aware of this often sets us apart as an investor. So, like Warren Buffett once said, it's a very famous quote, be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy. That is something which every investor should hold very close to their hearts as a quote.
Well, okay, I beautifully explained. I hope that everybody must have understood what are the bull run says and what is the bear run says. But now, $1 million question for you, Anirudh, that what do you think what the challenges would be, where the market will go? Because these are the general concern I believe every investor must be facing or must be looking at right now, where the market will go, what is your prediction for this, and what will challenges could be there now after this COVID-19 and other relevant things?
Uh, so I'll answer your question in 2 parts, Deepika. The first being where the market will go. I have no idea. And I'll be very, very honest. And if anyone tells you they know where the markets are headed in the short run, they're definitely lying. Because there are so many variables right now. And currently what we're seeing is a very classic scenario where two very strong emotions, hope and fear, are clashing on an almost day-to-day basis. Some are saying this is an illogical rise in stock prices. I am inclined to agree, right? Maybe it's just hope driven, maybe because everything is opened up and people are assuming that it's not as bad as it should be. So that hope is pushing stock prices up. Similarly, we have seen days during this COVID crisis when key indices have cracked 4, 5, 6, 7% on a daily basis. How do you explain that? Now see, COVID hasn't fundamentally changed anything on a day-to-day basis. But the fear and the hope that is arising out of the day-to-day evolution of COVID is what is driving the market right now. And what I personally am very sure is going to keep driving the market for the next 6 to 9 months, because COVID is not over yet, right? We've learned new ways of working. And yes, the world has adapted to an extent, but there's a long way to go before we can say that we are safely out of the woods. So long story short, prediction for the next 3 to 6 months is extreme volatility. It's hard to say which direction it's going to go. And I know this may come as a disappointment to many who are looking for a prediction, but we really cannot make a prediction on the short-term direction of the market. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, as we'll understand later. Having said that, I'm also going to spend a little time talking about the future. Now, this is more visible. Now, equity markets are actually very unique in the sense that what is right in front of us, which means tomorrow or day after or next week, is relatively less predictable than what could happen a year or two later. That's a very interesting trait of equity markets. Now, I have, and whatever walk of life you're from, you may be a finance professional or not, it doesn't require finance acumen to understand the kind of opportunities that have been unlocked by COVID. And these are there for all of us to see. First, I very firmly believe India's long-term growth story is intact. This is an exogenous shock. It hasn't changed any key element of our economic growth in the next 3 to 5 years. Our private sector debt is relatively low compared to global peers. Our demographics are absolutely fabulous. And by demographics, I mean 1 in 5 people who are going to join the workforce in the next 10 years in the world are going to be Indians. I'm sure we all understand how that augurs for us compared to other more mature nations where many more people are going to retire than are going to become productive. Our forex reserves recently hit almost 538 billion. That's outstanding because it gives a sense of stability to our currency. It gives foreign investors more confidence to invest in our country. And our forex reserves have been going up like never before. Our GDP percentage of services in GDP, I personally believe, is one of our key strengths. And more than half of our GDP comes from services. And I'm sure many of you who are present here today are working from home. And you've continued working throughout this crisis. And yes, there have been setbacks, but it hasn't run you to the ground. Now, that's the beauty of services. It is far more resilient compared to a manufacturing-led economy. And these 4 things are intact, right? Despite the current shock. I also would like to say that, and I apologize if I'm sounding over-optimistic, but these are genuine facts. There are some long-term positives that have been unlocked actually by COVID-19. Lower oil prices, for example. We're struggling with high oil prices for a long time. India is a net importer of oil, as we all know, and each dollar increase in oil prices hurts us. Now, the drop in oil prices is bound to have a positive impact on us, on our economy in the long run. Our trade deficit with China, which has anyway been coming down, 63 billion, 53, then 48, is going to come down even further. Again, a very positive outcome. Our gold imports, which are crippling for the economy, are going to reduce further. We are going to also benefit from the manufacturing sector fallout from the anti-China sentiment over the next 6-8 months. We've had a lot of economic reforms, trillions and trillions of rupees worth, and that has led to more liquidity from banks to borrowers. I personally believe that this reduced borrowing cost, alongside initiatives like repo rate linked loans and faster transmission, are going to kickstart the growth engine, consumption engine of the economy at some point. I remain extremely hopeful of that. And of course, the paradigm shifts that we witnessed in the Indian services industry are incredible. We cannot discount that. I've been talking to a lot of senior industry leaders over the last 1 month. All of them, including CFO level people, are absolutely confident that they'll be able to turn this to their advantage by creating new working models, which will lead to tremendous efficiency, further cost savings. So, of course, COVID has hit us and hit the markets, but these long-term positives, I personally believe, and a lot of people ask when. A common question is, "Achhe din kab aayenge?" Now, I wish I could predict that, but what I have observed over the last decade and a half is it's sudden and it's quick when it does happen. Now we've had a very bad 10 years. It's not just been a 3-4 year lull. I remember when I was working as a private banker back in 2009-10, and the whole GDP growth was exploding, and suddenly we hit a wall, and that wall hasn't actually been broken past for the last 10 years, which is a fact. So it's a given that at some point all this will come together and and change everything. And I do believe that is at some point around the corner. Harshit, you heard us patiently. We've spoken about our take on the economy, on markets, on what's happened so far. Given all of this, you're a team leader at FinEdge. You oversee several thousand investor relationships. What would your advice be in terms of avoiding any key mistakes at this point, given the current scenario?
Right, absolutely, Anirudh. So I've been managing a lot of clients, a lot of investors. So there are certain mistakes, which as an investor we should avoid at this point of time. So the first mistake is basically fence sitting. So what I mean by fence sitting is where investors, lack, decisiveness whether to invest at this point or not, because there is certain fear in their mind that market still can correct. So they lose out the opportunity at this point of time. So any opportunity is actually a good time to enter into the market. So these are the investors who just sit out of the market and sit on the idle cash. Actually, they lose out the opportunity. The next and most important is stopping and restarting the SIPs. So this is the biggest mistake as an investor we should avoid, because SIP itself is an advantage, because it is kind of an advantage. We take the advantage of SIPs when markets are volatile, when markets are fluctuating. We take the advantage of buying more units at this point of time. So this is an ideally an accumulation phase right now. So to give you an example, I'm an investor myself as well. So when markets corrected in the month of March, April, and May, it has been corrected by more than 30-35% at that time. So I have patiently invested into the market and continued my SIPs. So surprisingly, I was just checking my portfolio yesterday only. So in the month of March, April, and May, I'm getting a return more than actually 20% in my investments.
For those
And
tranches?
absolutely, for those specific tranches, if I would have stopped and panicked at that time, I would have lost that interest which I'm getting right now. So this
No,
is the
Harshit, I will add on one to this very important point you made from my
right,
own personal observation. And I fully agree with your viewpoint that stopping and starting your SIPs is very detrimental. And I'll also tell you why. We tend to stop at the wrong time and start at the wrong time.
right,
Now, if people stopped their SIPs when markets were high, and which means when confidence was high, and
right,
started their SIPs when confidence was low and despair was there, it would be a very different story. But
absolutely,
just to add on to your point, Harshit, since people usually are inclined to do the reverse of that, that's what leads to problems. And in the end, it leads to suboptimal returns from SIPs.
right. To continue further, so again, a mistake we as an investor should avoid is trying to time the market. Again, I've come across a lot of time, where investors say that we are at a bottom right now. I have invested, suppose, a 1 lakh rupee and the value is now 80,000 or maybe 90,000. So they themselves predict the market, that market will further go down. So I should pull out this amount and I'll invest at the time when markets will high. So, as we have already discussed in the previous slides, nobody can predict the market. Neither you, nor me, nor anyone. If anyone can predict the market, he'll be a multi-billionaire or a millionaire. So, avoid this mistake of, timing the market. And lastly, the again most important is when we see our hard-earned money in negative. So again, a panic button is, pressed. We stop our investments, we redeem our investments, but we forget what are we saving for. We generally do savings for our long-term goals, that is retirement, maybe for our kids' education, their marriage. But when we see our portfolio in red, we start panicking. We try to pull out our amount from the market. We try to stop our investments. So actually, these are all mistakes we as an investor should avoid at this point of time, because this is not a last event that has happened, COVID. There are multiple events that has happened in the past and also in the future. So we should take the advantage of these events rather than stopping and redeeming our investments at this point of time.
I think very,
Yeah,
very well summed up, Harshit.
exactly.
If every person who's attended this had to take away one just one piece of wisdom from this presentation is this. I think if you could just avoid these 4 mistakes, it'll really stand you in good stead. Is what I think. Sorry, over to you, Deepika.
Yeah, this is what only I wanted to convey, that from this thing we should only convey this thing only, that these are the majorly 4 mistakes which ideally investors should avoid. Then only that would be a scenario wherein those will be people, wherein they will be able to generate the expected returns for their financial goals. Now I would like to show you some data here. You can see that we have shown you the data of different 10 years horizon, wherein you all can see that yes, at every phase definitely markets would have been highly volatile, markets would have been erratic, and definitely different economic activities would have also been taking place. Still, when we look at the returns of different time frame, we can see that markets have always beaten the expected returns. You can see that every time it has been over and above 12% only. Even if, let's say here I talk about a phase wherein which was a worst market scenario back in 2008, from 2008 till 2027, the one who has invested their money, they must have got some 17.25 annualized return. So that's what we are trying to say. So I'll say that if now here the key learning is that ideally an investor should avoid 4 mistakes which Harshad I explained. Then only ideally you will be in a position to generate your returns. Secondly, most importantly, your investment should be for long term.
Deepika, great points. I want to add on again to what you're saying. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
so 2 things really jump out at me over here, and actually it speaks very highly of you as investors. Most of you who are attending this webinar invest very differently from everyone else. And I'll have to say that from my experience, simply because most people do ad hoc investments, but you as investors, most of you have clearly defined goals and you're investing for them, which automatically channelizes equity money into long-term goals. And I believe, Deepika, when you make financial plans, you come across many people who have retirement goals which are 10, 20, 30 years away. And you start SIPs keeping that in mind.
Exactly.
So that's a mistake we make, and I would say this over the last few years. I've observed this, and I've often pondered upon this, that it is unfortunately the liquidity feature of mutual funds that works to our disadvantage sometimes. If you compare it to an LIC or an NPF or a PPF, which have hard lock-ins, we are all right with committing money for 25, 30 years. We don't touch them, we don't look at them. Or even when we buy real estate, we don't usually flip that real estate. We hold on to it for 10, 15, 20 years. When it comes to financial assets, when it comes to SIPs, most of us end up, unfortunately, falling prey to those behavioral traps because everything is so visible and everything is so liquid and divisible, and we end up working that to our disadvantage. So uh, the other thing that, of course, jumps out is these are paper returns, Deepika.
Yes.
And I always tell, I actually encourage everyone who's present here to do a simple exercise after this presentation. Go to any website, Value Research or Money Control, any high ranking website, take any decent middle quartile equity mutual fund and see their 10-year SIP return from any period to any period. And you may be surprised to know that most of them will be very, very encouraging. Some may even be higher than this. And another lesson that jumps out is, in all of these tenors, there have been crises. There was the subprime mortgage crisis. There was the European crisis. There was the Greek debt crisis. There was political instability. There have been the trade wars. There was political uncertainty in India, right? There was Brexit. I mean, I can have a laundry list of events that have shaken the markets in each of these time frames. And I know personally, because I had SIPs running in most of these time frames. I've been a SIP fan ever since they were launched. And I have unfortunately seen my portfolio in the negative even after 2, 3 years of investing. And I have used a framing technique to overcome that, which I'll share in the last slide. And it's never easy. It's never easy to see your hard-earned money at flat or negative returns over extended periods of time. But here is, I think, the key lesson, and it's something which you all know in the back of our minds, is time in the markets beats timing the markets. So the moment you start timing the market, stopping and starting SIPs, redeeming out of panic, these paper returns no longer exist. They just become that. They become paper returns. And that's exactly why maybe about 20, 30% of SIP investors have actually realized these returns. Either they've just shut off and forgotten it and forgotten that their SIP is running, or they were a financial planning led, a goal-based investor like many of you are. So you were aligned differently.
Right.
Now, just moving on, this is I keep going back to this slide personally because, like I said, I'm an equity investor myself, and I have felt a lot of deep frustration with the way the economy and the markets have behaved over the last few years. So I have to keep going back and reminding myself why I'm going through this pain. You know, because the truth is, if there was a risk-free manner of accumulating enough money to fund our retirement or our child's education or beat inflation, we would all take it up with our eyes closed. There is none. That is a fact. And I was just doing the maths with a friend the other day. He said, I want the equivalent of 50,000 rupees every month when I retire. He's 35 years old. And the amount of money that was required was mind blowing, it was shocking. Right? We tend to forget inflation. We tend to forget how inflation and will play out over the length of duration left to our retirement and also during our retirement. So just to give you an example, you save 10,000 rupees for 30 years in an LIC or a PPF, which are the two traditional go-to investments for retirement for most of us. It's what we've been geared to do since we were very young. You'll probably end up with around 1 crore rupees when you retire. 1 crore is a lot of money. But here's an interesting number. 1 crore rupees will not suffice to fund even 50,000 rupees worth of expenses today for 5 years when you retire, if you're a 35-year-old. So therefore the need for growth assets. That's what I'm trying to come to. The reason why we go through these cycles and this pain and we commit ourselves to investments that go up and down is because we cannot afford not to. In the end, there is no choice, because the other choice is to get locked into these low return assets and definitely lead a suboptimal life, or play the odds of sticking around over long time frames, 10, 15, 20 years, and being dispassionate, not making those common mistakes, and giving yourself a higher chance of accumulating a 3.5 crore kind of a corpus, which basically is what compounding does for you. So equities compound on a continuous basis. If your 1 lakh becomes 1.1 lakhs, and then the markets go up 5%, 1 lakh won't grow, 1.1 lakhs will grow. So that's known as continuous compounding. And this makes all the difference between a 7-8% return and a 12% return. And the numbers here are there for everyone to see and verify. And the fact is, we have no choice but to take this leap into growth assets. And the unfortunate trade-off of that is that we will often see such phases. This is not the first time we've seen such a phase, and this is not the first time we will see such a phase in the journey going forward. Another very interesting point I wanted to make, a number. I believe numbers always interesting. So you saw the graph earlier where investors are sitting on, let's say, a -1% kind of a return over 3 years on their SIPs. It just takes a 25% rally to turn that CAGR, which means the annualized return of that SIP, to 12%. And if you see the downside which small and mid caps or the broader market has been through, where they're now, instead of 100 rupees trading at 40 or 45 rupees, I would say a 25-30% upside is definitely possible at some point. So yes, it is frustrating to see zero returns for a long time, but know that it takes one sweep, it takes 5 good months, 6 good months to turn not just the sentiment around. It takes that much time to just turn around your entire CAGR return of your entire savings period. So that's how equities work. And so if you want to benefit from compounding, we've already discussed this. I'm just going to use this opportunity to sum it up. There are 3 things which you must do to avoid these are compounding killers, essentially, so to speak, for lack of a better word. One, if you've got a goal-based investment, don't redeem it unless you really need to. Right? In this current situation, some people have needed to redeem their monies, let's say due to a job loss or to a financial crunch. Yes, you have to redeem it, then you have to. But don't redeem it simply because you're worried about markets or you're missing the comfort of FDs and LIC, because then you're just digging yourself into a deeper hole. You've seen the worst. You've seen a bad phase of low returns. And now when mean reversion kicks in, that was there in one of the slides earlier, mean reversion means anything that goes up comes down, anything that goes down comes up. So bad is followed by good. When mean reversion kicks in, you'll be sitting on the fence, as Harshit said. Second, don't panic due to market volatility. Very easily said. I panic when markets are volatile. It's easy for me to write this on a slide, but I think it's critical to control that panic, to work through it, to embrace it in the end. And of course, as has been already mentioned earlier by Harshit, stopping your SIPs during low return phases is equivalent to taking a bazooka and removing the ammunition from it. Because like Harshit said, his SIPs that were debited in March and April, ultimately those tranches are up 16-17%, and that is a classic case of rupee cost averaging. It's because you can't predict the depth of any fall or any rise. That you let your SIPs flow into the market, wave in, wave out, and in the long run, over long-term periods, which means for your long-term goals, there is a very high probability that you will accumulate significant wealth for them. Deepika, I want to roll this back to you at this point. You deal with a lot of different kinds of investors on a day-to-day basis, and you do a great job with them. Have you observed any differences in the way investors who have goals mapped and investors who don't have goals mapped behave?
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say about these two things, but I'll try to sum up in a very small thing. But I would say, before explaining or before saying anything further, Anirudh, according to me, having a goal gives you actually a long-term vision, and that too with a short-term motivation. If you don't have any financial goal, I don't think, like, it would be something like wherein you can barely strive for it, I would say. And
Any
altogether,
examples from the people you engage with, from, let's say, this
yes.
audience?
If I talk about my clients, then I would say there was a time back in the month of March when actually Nifty fell to 7,500 points. I generally try getting in touch with most of my clients, and even this is what I tried during that time also, because that was actually a tough time. So when I called them, and even when I am in the conversation right now also, or even in these days, I do ask them very clearly, are you facing any sort of issue? I hope you're not getting panic after seeing this kind of a market, and you're not getting worried. And I'm actually surprised after listening to all those things that people do say, investors do say, my clients do say that in the end, why would I will get worried after seeing this kind of a market phase? Because I'm pretty clear I have started these investments aiming for my retirement, which is another 10-15 years down the line, might be 20 years down the line. I started these investments for child education, which is going to take place another 10 years down the line. So that's the reason I'm pretty clear, and they're least bothered after seeing this kind of a market phase actually, which is, I would say, a good thing. And that's why we say that having a
Outstanding.
goal-based
And it makes
investment
me
is
very
good.
proud of it. Makes me very proud of being a part of you all, your lives. To
Yes.
see how maturely you all have reacted during this cycle. And SIPs have just been getting debited, and those portfolios are slowly recovering. So I think that's all got to do with goals. What about anyone? Have you encountered anyone
Yeah.
who doesn't have, who's an ad hoc kind of an investor, Deepika?
Yes, I have, like, I would like to share a recent example only. In the month of April only, one of my friend called me. Actually, we both started our career at the same time only, but he joined IT and I came into this finance thing. So he started investing through a bank. Okay, and in the month of April, he was actually getting worried after seeing minus 30, minus 35% returns. And he was being asking me, and he was after me of letting him know that where is he going wrong, whether he has done any sort of wrong investment or he should step out. So I just asked him simply to share his portfolio with me. And actually, when I looked at his portfolio, I was amazed, because firstly, he made all ad hoc investments. Some NFOs were there. He made all random investments without making any specific agenda for that. And that was a time when I actually felt good that my clients made a goal-based investment. That's the reason they are least concerned about this kind of a market. And after seeing 30-35% negative returns also, people were fine, because they knew that yes, the agenda is only long term. And that's the
Absolutely.
reason goal makes you a better investor in the end.
Very key lesson. And
Yeah.
I often tell people that financial planning is simple but not easy. So it is really simple. All that we've heard today is it's very simple. None of it is rocket science. None of it is difficult to understand. But I find very few people having the ability to execute that over the long run. A very interesting example of that also is losing weight, by the way. So I always say financial planning is like losing weight, because losing weight is very simple. You just eat less and exercise more. You have to write a book on losing weight. It's 4 words. Is it easy? It's not easy at
Not
all.
easy at all.
No, no.
I think when that gulab jamun is in front of you, it's very difficult to resist. So
Right.
that's what it is. So So that's what financial planning, that's what goal-led approach is. We often tend to confuse personal finance and make it very, very complicated. It's really not very complicated. It's about understanding risk. It's about understanding why you're investing and then sticking to it. That's what it means. And in the long run, you will make money. I'm going to bring this presentation to a close because we have a lot of questions that have come up, and Harshit, I'm sure you'll want to address a lot of them. This is our last slide, and I dare say a very, very important slide. It talks about framing the current situation. Now, most of us look at successful investing as percentage of returns earned, and that is one lens to look at it through. And I agree, it is very, very important. I'm in no way saying that you don't need to earn returns. You need to put your money in a piggy bank and just stash it away. Returns are critical because my only point is returns are not in our control. What is in your control is your savings discipline. So just by virtue of having made a financial plan, having gotten started and having saved even 50,000 rupees, you are 50,000 rupees better off than zero. Even if that 50,000 hasn't grown, even if that 50,000 is 49,000 today, you are 50,000 rupees on the way to achieving an important goal. That is in your control. So why I say this is you have to, if you want to be a successful saver and achieve your financial goals, you have to stop looking at money as a way of keeping score. And you have to start looking at it as a means to an end. When you start doing that, you start measuring your success differently. You start measuring your success as percentage of goal achieved, and believe it or not, that makes a massive difference to your behaviors. You become more patient, you become more wise, your investments are aligned to the long term or short term if it's a short term goal, and you become more disciplined with your investment. So I know it's disheartening to see you've put in 10 lakhs and it's 10 lakhs. It's never good to see that. But please understand, you are 10 lakhs better off than had you not started with financial planning. You're well into your savings strategy already. Even if your retirement target is 4 crores in 2035, as one of our very dear investors, he came to me the other day and he said, my retirement target is 4 crores and I have saved just 10 lakhs. And I said, 10 lakhs is a lot. Why? Because 10 lakhs is going to grow for the next 15 years. So don't underestimate what compounding and what the reversal of market cycles at some point, which is inevitable. It's impossible that cycles and sentiment and business cycles will not reverse. That is, go back 100 years, it always happens. So it's just that it's not in our control. So my key message is control what you can control, be disciplined, watch your behaviors, watch your investment patterns, be rational. Don't worry too much about market cycles, economic cycles, pandemics, which will come and go. These things, when you're a SIP investor especially, and when you're an equity investor for the long term, you can't worry about these things. You have to stay put. You have to continue on the path. Deepika, you have a wonderful audience here of some people who you've been speaking to for so long. Before we move to Q&A, is there anything you'd like to tell all these people present?
Yeah, Anirudh, thank you for giving this opportunity. I would just like to convey three simple things to you. Firstly, if by any chance for any of you financial planning has not been done yet, do let me know so that we can set up a call. And another thing, having your goals reviewed is equally important because if your goal reviews have not been done, I would say that that is not important only for you, but that is more important for an advisor also, so that accordingly we can eliminate the funds which are not required as per your goals, as per the tenure of your investment, and so that accordingly we can review your portfolios also.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you.
So thank you, Deepika and Anirudh, for sharing the insights. So we'll move on to the final bit, that is the Q&A. So I'll just quickly run through the questions.
Just a quick point I'd like to make, Harshit, before you move in. We will not be able to answer a lot of questions because out of respect for everyone's time, we'll have to conclude the session in about 15-20 minutes maximum. If there are any unanswered questions, we will go through them and we will get back to you offline. Deepika will definitely address those questions offline one by one.
Sure. So Ms. Mona has asked a valid question that given the slowdown globally and the corporate results likely to remain subdued in Q2 financial year 2021, don't you believe the rise in stock market indices in India lack logic and hence a large correction is bound to happen soon? Does investments such as SIP in gold bonds make sense at prevailing prices? So Anirudh, would you like to take this question up?
Sure. I'm going to answer this quickly and I'm going to answer both parts of it. The first part, which is it irrational? Yes, it may lack logic. You're absolutely right. You're spot on. Like I said, there has been reversion. One thing that the last decade and a half has taught me is financial markets and economy never move in tandem. So, and this is a very common perception that the economy will do well and markets will do well and vice versa. But no, it's always leading or lagging the economy. So in this case, it may have run ahead. Will a large correction happen soon? Again, highly unlikely because there's a lot of liquidity in the markets. You could see a situation where the markets will be stuck, but correction happened because of COVID. That has unraveled. We have been able to understand that exogenous shock. So it's unlikely that there'll be another crash because of COVID, but there could be a subdued kind of a phase which could go on. Volatility could go on. Investments in gold bonds, sovereign gold bonds, no, definitely not, because sovereign gold bonds lock you into a peak price. For example, if you invest in the current tranche, you would be locking into a very high price. If you want to go into gold, why not? It's a decent hedge. Speak to Deepika about it. You could go 10-12% into a gold savings fund or a gold ETF. There is no harm in that. My only issue with gold is it goes into a shell for very long. I am not that patient. So I have personally never successfully invested in gold because I've seen the movements very erratic and unpredictable because they only move when there are exogenous shocks such as COVID or when there is a crisis kind of a situation and reserve banks start hoarding gold and then it starts moving up. Very difficult for it to grow out of any other reason. So, but yes, why not as a hedge, 10-15% of your portfolio, you can do an SIP and build out to that, but not in a sovereign gold bond.
So Mr. Prashant has asked a question: how to predict the despair point?
Mr. Prashant, I wish I could. And if you ever learn how to predict it, please give me a call.
Right.
It's impossible, but jokes apart, there are certain indicators. If you, for example, follow technical analysis, there are certain key levels, breakdown or stabilization levels, which can be used to predict, well, not predict the despair point exactly, but you can predict a range of certain behaviors. For example, if there are very long red candles and if you see that there are massive sell-offs happening every single day, then we are nearing the despair point. So there are indicators. We have some indicators here at Finedge as well to not predict the point, but to predict when despair has set into the market. And that happened, for example, in March. And we did encourage a lot of investors at that time. Some of them are present here today who I've spoken to personally, and Deepika has helped me with them. We did ask them rather to consider investing lump sums of money at that point of time. And those investments are sitting at fairly decent short-term profits. Not that I'm very happy about that because short-term profits could go up or down, but that was a good point to kind of reallocate money to equities.
So Mr. Dattatreya has asked a question: though we can see the improvement in the market, there is no consistency which was prior to COVID. Can we expect it back now? So Deepika, would you like to take it?
Well, I would say, hi, Mr. Dattatreya. I would say that, yes, I do agree. There is no consistency as of now. And this is also very much expected markets to remain volatile at least for another few more months. But the best part is that, like, after reviewing your portfolio also, we can get into detailed discussion for this thing. But the best part for us is that being a monthly SIP investor, the more volatility will be there, that is going to be more in our favor only.
Right. So
I'd also like to add on to that very quickly. From my experience in the markets, there is a sudden pivot. Everything comes together at once. I've been waiting for that quite patiently, and that usually comes at the end of a very major exogenous shock. Like, for example, when sentiment was at its worst in 2000, after 2008 crash, and the Nifty had gone back to 2,400 levels, right? Suddenly, everything started coming together again, and that's when there was a massive rebound. So I expect that to happen sometime in 2021. There will be some kind of a pivot when there'll be a huge sentiment shift, and that's when you'll see a lot of low returns being covered up very, very quickly. I'm quite confident of that.
So Mr. Vivek Vishal has asked a very valid question. What is general timeline for the cycle turn? Past experience, observation in different slowdown scenario. How to estimate expected time of recovery? So Anirudh, if you can throw some light on this, please.
Uh, Unpredictable, but 15 to 18 months is what we've observed as a macro cycle in any equity market. Now that could be one of three. It could be a bearish cycle, it could be a flat cycle which leads to a breakout or a breakdown, or it could be a bullish kind of cycle. So 15 to 18 months is a general, after any kind of massive exogenous shock, for a cycle to kind of turn around in a robust manner.
So Mr. Subramania has asked a question, what should be the medium-term financial planning? Is it equity dominated or debt dominated? So Deepika, can you please take it?
Well, Mr. Matthews, that depends that what time frame actually you're looking for a shorter term. If let's say you are looking anything for a term which is less than 3 years, after seeing current position, I would say go straight away for debt mutual funds. If your time horizon if anywhere close to more than 3 years or 4 5 years, then we may consider getting into equity funds. But within equity also, we also need to consider less risky funds.
So
I have a point to add here. Neither debt nor equity right now. If you have a medium term, by medium term, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about 3-4 years. 3-4 years is too short a time to get into equity, if you ask me. Look at something like a dynamic asset allocation or a hybrid fund.
okay.
These are a very good opportunity. There's an opportunity to earn decent returns in a dynamic asset allocation fund if you have a medium term kind of a time horizon for a 3 to 4 year period at this point.
So for next question, like investor's name is not showing, it is only the device name which is reflecting. So what will you say to invest in service sector at present? What is your opinion about investment in short term versus long term at present? Anirudh, can you please throw some light on this?
See, the service sector is worth investing into. Unfortunately, there is no service sector fund per se. There are funds that are heavily invested in the service sector. We are also aligning a lot of investments into those portfolios. I'm quite bullish on many aspects of the service sector, especially vis-a-vis manufacturing or consumer. Investment in short term versus long term, that purely depends on your goals. The current crisis, like I said, the markets are going to be volatile for the next 6 to 9 months. Great time to average out, great time to just commit money for a 7, 8, 10 year period. Otherwise, if you're risk averse, if you need the money in 3-4 years, probably the worst time. So it's a very polarized kind of a market at this point, because we are in the middle of a crisis, and as another participant also had said earlier, the current rise may be illogical. There could be waves of corrections over the next 6-9 months. Great accumulation opportunities for the long term, but for the short term investor, it could be crushing to see such returns, and it could lead to a lot of panic. So if you have a short term horizon, stick to arbitrage funds, or if you have a medium term horizon, stick to a dynamic asset allocation kind of a fund.
Right. So few of the clients are even saying, Deepika, you are great. In fact, source of inspiration. Thanks, Deepika and Anirudh, for clearing current market situation. It helped us build up the confidence. So word
Thank you
like
so much.
these definitely, motivate us. And in future also we'll try to, conduct more of these webinars as well. So
But I think we have time for
yes,
maybe we have 5 minutes, so we can take another
right.
2-3 questions.
So Mr. Shiva has asked a question. So how does small case investment differ from mutual funds? In small case, a better or worse comparing to MF? Please advise.
Small case is a very new concept, Harshit. I'll take this up if you don't mind. So small
Sure.
case is a very, very new concept, and basically I am a little skeptical about them because they are like your mini PMSs. And I was talking to a few small case fund managers, so to speak, and they're very new. Some are very new, some are, so it's an interesting mix. So it's like I can go and launch a small case if I want, or anybody could. So I'd be a little skeptical about it right now because professional fund manager vis-a-vis somebody who's just dabbling in stock and the strategy is not clear. It's kind of a spray and pray kind of a strategy. I would probably not look at small case at this moment. I would not disregard it. I'd wait for it to build up a kind of a track record and see where they falter before I commit my money to anything new. This has actually been my old habit. I always wait for I'm very patient when it comes to observing. I am even looking at REITs as an option since we're talking about new investment options. REITs, I'm observing maybe in the next 2-3 years, there'll be a fairly decent way of getting an allocation to real estate. But I'm not doing it right now. I'm going to wait. So whenever anything new is launched, I say wait. That's what I always tell people. We don't know how a certain thing will shape up, and often surprises come to light.
Right. So next question, like Mr. Vipul has asked, what kind of correction is expected?
Deepika, can you answer that because I can't?
Uh,
Nobody can.
no.
This is difficult.
right? Because nobody can predict the market,
Yeah.
as we have already discussed in the slides as well.
See, but I would like to add a point here, since this is something we're all asking, and it's a
Right.
very valid question, and we can't just discount this question. See, logically speaking, COVID we're in the middle of it. We have absorbed COVID to an extent. At least we have absorbed what it is. There are no new surprises coming at us. We know what it is. It's now a known enemy. Okay, and there is a lot of liquidity in the global and local financial markets. When I put these two things together, I am very tempted to say that it's very unlikely that we'll see a very deep cut. We'll almost certainly not see what happened in March. That was pure panic. So we will probably see a more of a roller coaster kind of a scenario, because there'll be the push and pull of, like someone very rightly pointed out, results will now start dictating market movements. The market at some point will stop focusing on COVID and say, hey, how have companies coped with COVID? How have banks coped with COVID? How have pharma companies, FMCG companies coped with COVID? And when that focus shifts to that, that is probably when we'll have a much clearer direction. Until then, there'll be oscillation. But the chances of a very deep cut, like the kind that we saw in March, April, I would give it a very remote chance. I'd be extremely surprised, given the liquidity and the fact that we have now understood COVID, understood the enemy a lot better.
So there are a lot of questions coming up. So like there is time constraint. So I'll be taking up last question, and whatever questions are left, Deepika will take it personally, individually with you.
Sure, sure.
So the
For
last question is by Mr. Vijayan Jha. What you suggest about investing in funds which invest in global market? Anirudh, can you please take this question?
I don't think it's a bad idea for an investor who understands investments, and for an investor who understands risks. Why I say that is I have had some terrible experiences with global funds. So whenever I'm a little skeptical, please, that's come out of some very bad experiences I've had. I've seen international funds cracking 60, 70%, and unpredictably, they were leveraged. Having said that, the reason why international funds are now coming in vogue is because the Nasdaq and the S&P have seen a very stellar kind of a rebound. Before that, not many people were asking about it. There is no harm in it. These are all allocated to good companies. My only point is, it is probably not going to deliver from this point to point. Even if it does deliver superior returns from our domestic equities, it's not going to be a massive gap. And then if you add the currency risk, and if you add the poor tax efficiency to that, that is why I tell people, fine, fair enough. Take a 5-10% allocation, take a bit of a double, allocate a little bit to your portfolio as a tactical strategy, as a satellite strategy, not the core. But don't go overboard, because in the end, don't forget that graph that we showed you. The reason you're having confidence in investing in international funds is because the returns are spectacular, and mean reversion will kick in at some point. So even if you do go in through a weekly STP kind of a mode, average your way in rather than investing a lump sum. But yes, gold in international funds, all of them make sense from a tactical standpoint as satellite aspects of one's portfolio.
Right.
Would you like to take one or two more, maybe, or
Sure, if you want to, just a second.
maybe just take a couple more? We'll have a 5-minute overrun, and then we'll apologize to our participants for keeping them
Sure.
about
So
5 minutes more.
James, Mr. James has one question. I have a question. You are talking about investing 10,000 per month in the slides and getting good returns over a period of time during some difficult times. But me being 29-year-old can invest only around 2,000 to 2,500 month for now. Will that generate good returns over the period over 15 to 20 years? Deepika, can you
Yeah,
please take
maybe.
this question?
Well, I would say, Mr. James, a return doesn't matter on the SIP amount, whether that could be for 10,000, that would be for 2,000. That doesn't matter in the end. What matters in the end, that you should always give a try of continuing your investments, and that to give a try of stepping up the things with a comfortable amount, so that your goal would also be achieved. That's what which is required.
I'd
Return,
also like to add to this, well begun is half done. I always tell people, just because you're
Right.
doing 2,500 rupees today, doesn't mean you'll be doing 2,500 rupees 4 years later. And the impact of a step up, and Deepika, I encourage you to sit with James and show him the magnifying power of a regular step up, disciplined step up is incredible. So you will definitely make returns.
Right.
You started early.
So another question is asked by Mr. HD. While while talking with my few of my colleagues, their advisors suggested them in March to reallocate their funds safely. But why you not suggested that our money could be saved from losses? Anirudh, can you
You want
please
me to take that
take
up?
this? Sure.
Uh, I suppose it's great that your friends' advisors were able to predict the depth of the market crash. I do suggest that you go back to them at some point now and ask whether they got back in. So I've always seen, I mean, call it beginner's luck or whatever. I've seen certain calls go correct when you're trying to take these tactical market timing calls. And a lot of people came to us when the Nifty was 9,000 and said, should we pull out now? And then the Nifty fell further to 7,500 and their portfolio sank 20% more. And a lot of these investors were rightfully rattled with our suggestion of staying put. But now if you go back to, in hindsight, it was not a bad decision to stay put and definitely to keep your SIPs running, because I don't think it is possible, from my experience, to get both legs right, which means there are two legs of any successful market timing endeavor. One is your exit and one is your entry. You may have gotten out in March, but did you get back in and take advantage? I don't think that's possible. And if that happened, well, hats off, kudos to that investment advisor. I would love to speak to him and get some tips, because it would have been an outstanding endeavor. Because I don't think market timing can be done consistently, and it usually works against you.
Right. So I'll take up the last question by Mr. Hari Surya. So he's asking, isn't the correction in current market is temporary? A recovery from earlier crashes has taken more than 400 days. Anirudh, can you please take this question?
Um, every crash is different. From what I've seen, there is no one size fits all formula for a crash. I was also amazed, and I look at technicals of market sometimes, and I thought we need to devise a new term called melting candles. It literally looked like the markets were melting. And then what happened was incredible. It may have been an accelerated kind of a correction. So you're absolutely right. It takes 400 days, it takes 450 days for a cycle. And that's exactly what amazed all of us also. But what seemed to have happened in March was a very accelerated kind of a bearish movement, because markets were already at elevated price to earnings ratios for quite some time. So what happened was a panic driven sell off, and it very quickly hit certain very strong support levels and boundary bounded back. So to answer your question, it's yes, past corrections may have taken 400 days, but that does not necessarily mean that this one would. We feel that correction that happened in March was in fact an accelerated correction. It should have happened over 6-8 months or maybe 400 days, but it happened quickly and found some very strong solid ground. I think let's conclude that, Arshad, now.
All right, absolutely. Thank you all for joining this webinar.
Deepika, would you like to say some words in conclusion?
Yeah. Thank you everyone for your compliments and for everything. So it was a great webinar. We'll definitely try of conducting these kind of webinars again.
I just want to say something in conclusion, that I've admired you as investors and your resolve and your gumption and how you invested, and it makes me very, very proud to see a lot of you moving closer to your goals. And I would like to thank you again. You've taken time out, and I hope this has been an hour well spent. And also, we really look forward to interacting with you in this manner very, very frequently going forward.
Okay.
With that, we bring this to a close, and have a wonderful Sunday, everyone.